Welcome back to Restoring Sean. It feels weird that it has been 3 weeks since I have posted one of these videos, and in the interim, I'm sorry for blowing up your Instagram feeds with the progress pictures from the manor. I got a little bit behind on posting those and needed to get them all out before this season premiered because the manor is done. After a brief hiatus for what I'm going to call a summer holiday where I dialed in pretty intensely on this house and projects that I had going on, today is a very special day for you to tune in because we are officially in season 2, subtitled Restoring the Ranch. Over the next 11 episodes, I will transform this mid-century house from dated to new and all of the trials and tribulations that came along with it. This season will run through October 2nd, and then will be followed up by 4 Halloween-themed episodes that will run through the month of October, and then November will kick off with Restoring the Estate, this house that I am currently in. First, we need to start from the beginning, and that is this episode where we uncover exactly how I found my second house. If you're new to the channel, I post a new video every Wednesday morning where I do some sort of water routine into all of the work that went into restoring my second home, the ranch. All opinions are my own, never assume I have the correct answer, and did you know? In 2020, as I was looking for the ranch, I got real trigger happy with the face swap app, specifically putting my face on Chris Hemsworth and imagining that somewhere in some universe, this was what I actually looked like. Imaginations are key, y'all, and that's how I stroll through life. Let's get started. When I listed my first house for sale, the manor, at the end of July 2020, I wrote into my seller's conditions that I needed a 2-month close. This meant that I needed 2 months after selling the house before I had to turn the keys over to the new owner for them to take possession. This was largely due to the fact that I could not A, afford to purchase a second home while still owning the first, and B, I needed to find that second home to purchase. With the Minneapolis market as crazy as it was in 2020, I knew that it was going to be an uphill battle to find a new home that was everything I wanted and hoped for and be able to secure the house as my own. I had been jilted from the home buying process the first time around with looking at over 30 houses and ultimately making offers on 5, so I really was not excited for this process. But the funny thing is, if you want to sell your house and buy again, you have to do this. My search parameters had changed quite a bit since I purchased the manor, as this time around I was not focused on living so close to downtown Minneapolis. So if we look at this image with my unparalleled photo editing skills, you can see the area that I lived in before. In the next image, this was a bit more of what my search area would actually be. No farther south than I already had been, and ideally much farther north. In the top left corner is Maple Grove, where I worked, and the arrow is pointing to Brooklyn Park, which was where I would eventually find and purchase the ranch. With the manor selling in the first week of being listed, the hunt began with my friend and realtor, Chad, at the helm. And I want to say in the first week we looked at maybe a dozen houses. Sometimes Chad couldn't make it to do the showing, so I would go with his assistant or a coworker from the real estate office. And luck be damned, in the first week of looking, I found what was going to be my house. It was this great single-story mid-century house. It had never been updated, and it had these semi-Tudor looking finishes on the outside with a disaster of a backyard that reminded me a lot of the manor. It was convenient to the highways and shopping, and it was still just about 13 minutes from downtown, which was great because it didn't add much time to the drive if I wanted to go downtown compared to what the manor had been, but it was still further north, so it was a little bit more removed from crime and just kind of busyness of feeling like you were in the downtown proximity. It was also near the Greenbelt, which is like a nature walking trail. So it was a win. I saw the house twice before making my offer, which was well above asking price. I didn't ask for an inspection with it, yada yada. This was going to be my house. And then I lost this house. Then I lost the offer I made on the next house. But you know what? Then I lost the offer I made on the third house. But don't worry, because just as it happened with the manor, I lost the offer I made on the fourth house as well. This isn't to say we were looking at over 30 houses like the hunt for the manor entailed, because we weren't. I think in total I viewed 25 houses. I knew what I wanted this time around, and I was scared away by a whole lot less than I was the first time around in my hunt. I knew what work was required for houses, and I knew what I was capable of doing myself. I think in 1 week alone I made offers on 2 of the places. So I was pulling the trigger at any chance that I could and just
losing.
And what's funny is that a few of these places were actual dumps. One of them was so far north of the cities, it was in a town or city village called Anoka, which was very far north from what I wanted to do. This house literally was missing sheetrock in several of the rooms. It had no flooring other than OSB or plywood flooring, and there was visible black mold in the garage. And I still made an offer on it above asking, and I still lost the house. So that was the market. All this is also keeping in mind that unlike the last time, I was actually a desirable candidate this time around. Yes, my purchase was contingent on the manor actually closing and selling, but the manor was sold, so that was pretty much as good as it was going to get. So bully for me. One of the communities I had been looking in was Brooklyn Park, which is about as far north from Minneapolis as you can get and still have your address sometimes pop up or auto-populate as Minneapolis. Brooklyn Park is notable for, I'm sure, a few things, but really 2 things in particular. One is that it is the site of the northern campus for Target, which is based in Minnesota, for anybody watching that did not know that. You can throw a fucking ball and you'll hit 3 Target stores because they're everywhere. The second is that about a year and a half after moving into the ranch, Taco Bell Defy opened, which was the newest model for the restaurant, and it included several drive-under lanes, and this actually made national news when it opened. There was no interior for the restaurant, you just did the drive-thrus. So there you have it. That's Brooklyn Park. There was a day in mid-August of 2020, the 19th to be exact, where Chad and I were going to go look at 3 houses earlier in the day and then grab lunch. The first was an immediate no, the second was an immediate no, and the third, well, the third was interesting. In the MLS listing, the house was described as a California ranch, which is defined as a single-story, sprawling home in an L or U shape that is built closer to the ground. What made this interesting, or coincidental, is that later that very day, I was going to be flying to California to visit one of my best friends, Tina, and her family in the San Francisco Bay Area. Initially, Chad and I drove right past the road because, unlike normal neighborhoods, this house was situated down a private road that looked more like an alleyway when you approached it than a street. So we backtracked, turned down the very cracked blacktop, and 3 houses in, there it was. Now, I'm not gonna lie, I was not impressed, but I was desperate, and the clock was literally ticking, and I needed to find a house. Visiting California was not ideal because that meant it was 4 entire days that I would not be able to look at any prospective houses. The house, or the ranch as I have obviously coined it, was a weirdly laid out home on its lot, on a road of very weirdly laid out homes on their lots, with a 5-car wide driveway that was just a single car deep. Apart from the massive arborvitae in the backyard, there was no landscaping on this lot. Even though it had a basement and was built to look like a ranch styled home, its configuration in relation to the road and how close the houses were on this street, they all looked like manufactured homes. And there's nothing wrong with that, and if you live in a modular or manufactured home, I mean, absolutely no shade on you. It's just not what I wanted. But again, I was desperate. The listing photos, for whatever reason, did not have any images of the 3 bedrooms, and they had no images of the 3 bathrooms. I have no idea why, other than the listing agent, who was a total asshole, truly, took the pictures himself with his cell phone. So a couple of these photos you're about to see are ones that I took, but admittedly, There are not many pictures that I took beforehand. Walking inside, the house was very clean. You entered into the void of space that encompassed the kitchen, dining, and living room. Everything had been freshly painted white, and the laminate floors, while not in amazing condition, were in good condition. They did bounce a bit when you walked on them, and the metal ductwork beneath them rattled in several places, but that wasn't a deal breaker. The finishes and lighting were dated, and I guess that was just the general vibe of the ranch. If the manor had been ugly with the promise of beauty that was hidden beneath poor finishes, the ranch was just dated and, in a word, dry. It felt dry in there, old. Old, not in a charming old way, it just felt old. It lacked any kind of character, as if the house had just been forgotten about. I'm sure when this house was built, it was bursting with character compared to what it was now. Now it looked like a bad flip from the early 2000s. That's what it looked like. At the far end of the living room, there was a hallway that dead-ended in a bedroom at each side and a full bathroom in between them. Each bedroom had a nicely sized closet, and the hallway that connected them had a decent-sized linen closet as well. On the opposite side of the living room, the door off of the kitchen led to the primary bedroom suite, with a whole wall of closets and a full bathroom as well, albeit an ugly fucking bathroom, because the corner shower stall was horrific, and the blue tile around the tub was a pretty color, but just I don't understand. I don't understand. I don't understand. So that was that. The basement had been previously finished but no longer had any flooring. There were 2 crawl spaces, one underneath the far bedrooms and then one under the primary bedroom, and there was a half bathroom down there as well. Outside, it was just boring and, again, dry. The August heat did nothing to help with that, and the grass and weeds suffered because of it. All that said, we spent maybe 10 minutes in the house. It was mostly updated with newer windows that were less than 10 years old and a roof that was about the same age. Everything seemed to be in working order. The previous owner clearly had an eye on tech stuff because he had installed Ethernet jacks in all of the rooms, the bedrooms and the living room and throughout the basement. Ethernet jack, if you're unaware, is so that you can plug in your internet capable devices directly into an outlet rather than having to rely on your Wi-Fi. In the basement underneath the far bedrooms, there was a whole internet hub where everything connected, so you would put your modem and router and stuff down in this thing in the basement. Unlike when I viewed the manor and went through all of these memories that immediately made me feel like that was my house, that it was meant to be, pulling in houses from my past on each side of my parents' extended families. With the ranch, I felt nothing. Nothing. I felt nothing. There were no memories coming to me from the past. There was certainly no excitement over what I could turn this house into. It just felt and looked like the blank space that it was. End of story. Sidebar, sorry if you can hear a whirring sound now. It is, I've moved this recording studio upstairs from the bathroom down below, which you saw during season 1. And that bathroom is adjacent to the coldest room in the house, whereas this room is the hottest room in the house. So I have a fan on now because I'm roasting as I'm telling you this gripping story about the ranch, so bear with me. After looking at the house, after Chad and I did our whirlwind walkthrough where we were there for not even 10 minutes, that's how quick I am at looking at some of these things, we went to lunch. Over our food, I told him that I would make an offer. The house, I believe, was listed at $218,000, so I was going to offer $226,000. I wanted an inspection with this house, and I was going to put down, I think, 10%. I think that was it. So Chad drove me home. My friend Jonathan drove me to the airport. I electronically signed all the documents that Chad sent me to submit my offer, and then I was off to California. I was flying in late at night, and at the time the mountains were all on fire, so flying into San Francisco, I could see from my window seat the line of fire on the mountains. And because I arrived late, when Tina picked me up from the airport, we really just went back to their place in Sausalito and I crashed. So the next day, Tina and I took her kiddos and we went up for a hike in the hills behind their townhouse in the Marin Headlands. And while we were on our hike, literally as I was taking this photo of the bay, a phone call from Chad came through. Unsurprisingly, the ranch had gone into multiple offers, and the owners requested the best and final offers be submitted by the end of the day. So I said, okay, I don't think it's worth it, but I will raise my offer another $10,000, so $236,000. This was the absolute highest that my budget would allow. Me being a single individual with my salary from Pottery Barn, I simply was not approved for a loan higher than that. And that's just the simple truth of home buying, especially as an individual. You are limited by what the bank says that you can afford, and that's just how the apples fall. So the day went on. We drove down to Rodeo Beach for the sunset. I won't go on and on about my trip, but I just have to say this. As much of a bummer as it was that the mountains were on fire, the smoke did two things. One, it made for really interesting skies, and it caused the evacuation or staycation of San Francisco, with people being advised to stay indoors. Coupled with it being August of 2020 and COVID very much still raging on, the city was deserted. That made it one of the best trips I have ever taken in my life. We had so much fun. We did so many things. There was absolutely no waiting in lines. There was no traffic. We crossed the Golden Gate Bridge probably 6 times the time I was there, and never once got stuck in traffic. It was just this truly perfect scenario of a thing. On Saturday, the 21st, I got another call from Chad later in the day. Tina, family, and I were touring the city, and we were in Alamo Square, which faces the Painted Ladies in San Francisco, and you might recognize them if you've ever watched Full House or grew up in America watching TV. So the sellers asked for best and final offers, right? And I said, okay, $236,000, because that's what I can do, right? Well, apparently no one else did that, because what everyone else did was say, we will offer X amount with an escalation clause. And basically what that means is that you're saying, I will offer this much, but if someone else comes along and offers that much, I will also pay that much plus X amount over, because technically I can afford to spend more, which means that I want the house more, even though I'm not proving it to you. And that's not what the seller asked for. They asked for, say it with me, best and final. So because I followed instructions like the good boy that I am, the house was mine. I would be closing on September 19th, exactly 1 month from my offer submission, and finally, I could breathe easily. I would go on to have an amazing rest of my trip in California before flying back to Minnesota to pack up the manor so that I could move into my California ranch. Only things don't work out the way we want, do they? When I was back in Minnesota, I booked my inspection for the house through a company that was going to allow me to use a credit card to pay. Things as they were at the time, the amazing inspector that I had at the manor, Dale, he had a cash-only policy, and I just did not have the liquidity to pay that way. So I went with these jackasses that were based locally, whose name I cannot recall and don't want to put the effort into finding, because if I did find the name, I would slander the shit out of them. Because the inspection went pretty fine. They really found nothing other than some cracks in the chimney, and those were going to cost a bit to repair. So I asked the sellers for money back. They knocked $5,000 off the purchase price, which brought it down to $231,000. But nothing else was wrong. And that was awesome, that nothing else was wrong. And this was the start of everything falling apart for the next 2.5 years. Against my better judgment, I had decided to go with a different mortgage lender than I had previously, opting instead to work with this dude rather than Caroline, who I had worked with 2 times before. There was no reason I didn't go with her. This guy was recommended to me, and I just figured, sure, why not? From the get-go, I didn't like him, and I really felt like he could not give a shit about me. But filling out all of that paperwork and just doing all of that on top of selling your house and packing your house and doing all these things, I didn't have the energy to throw my hands up and say, I'm just going to go with Caroline instead. So I I stuck with him. At the start of September, I reached out to Chad and said that I had not heard anything from the lender. Like, not a peep, not an email, not a call, nothing. Didn't they need my bank statements, my proof of employment, my W-2s, my tax forms, my blood type, my urine sample? And Chad, being the absolute pro and never missing a beat, promptly answered, nope, everything's good, everything's on track. And I thought, okay, maybe it is. Maybe it is different when you're selling a house and buying rather than just being, the first time buyer. Like I'm not having to take the online courses of what it means to pay a bill. So maybe it's different. And then on September 12th, a week before the new owners took the keys to the manor and I accepted the keys to the ranch, Chad called me. I remember I was sitting upstairs in my office at the manor, and after the initial hellos, I will never forget the words that came next. Chad says, so I made a mistake, and I did not tell your lender that the offer you made was accepted. And my heart just caught in my throat, and I managed to choke out, what does that mean? And Chad promptly said, well, what that means is I will be putting you up in an Airbnb in a few days. I will cover that cost entirely for the few weeks that you're in there until September 30th, which is your new closing date. I will pay for a moving company to load up your house for you. They will store it, and then they will deliver it to your new house and unload it. Now, full disclosure and in all honesty, I was annoyed. I was annoyed because, call it me being me or me being a Capricorn, whatever, but I like things to go according to the meticulous plan that I have created for them. And for this, I had a plan. I was renting a budget truck. I was going to have 2 friends help me load it and unload it. And I was going to move at my own speed on my own terms. I was annoyed. That being said, I was not angry. I wasn't angry with Chad, partly because he was my friend and still very much is, but mostly because he was making it right. I think if he had called and said, hey, this is what happened, and I said, well, what now? And he said, I don't know. I think that would have been a very different story, but that's not what happened. He called me with the this is what we're doing. Did I want to displace the cats and myself for 2 weeks in an Airbnb? Hell no. Did I want all of my worldly possessions stuck in a semi-trailer off in a storage facility who the fuck knows where for a couple weeks? Absolutely not. But what was the alternative? Lemons into lemonade, it was what it was, and he had done everything he could to make this as stress-free as possible. The new owners of the manor, having already waited 60 days to close on the house, refused to move their close date 2 more weeks, and I absolutely understand that. The mortgage lender, while this certainly was not the mortgage lender's fault, he was not able to move at a lightning pace to get everything through underwriting and all that within, the 7 days that I had left in the house. And I understood that too. Thank the Dark Lord that the sellers, the ones that I was taking the ranch from, were fine with 2 weeks being added on to their ownership before they could sell the house. They understood the situation, that it was human error, and that nothing had changed in my ability to purchase the house. If not for that, and if they had decided, no, we're canceling the deal, I don't know what would have happened. And I'm probably nothing good. I'm grateful that it happened the way that it did. Let me be very clear about Chad for a minute, and as an aside before I continue on. I adore this man. I have known Chad for 6 years now. I have shared countless memories, celebrations, laughs, and tears with him. He has been there for me. I have been there for him. We have confided in each other. He sold the ranch for me when the time came. He's just a wonderful, caring person. In 2020, with the market moving at the pace that it was, there was room for one single human error, and unfortunately, it happened with me. Or maybe it was fortunate that it happened with me because I understood. I understood, and I didn't give him a hard time about it. I absolutely do not hold it against him. I didn't then, and I don't now. If anything, it made us closer. So Chad, if you're watching, I'm glad that we can look back at this and laugh. All that being said, We're still off to a bad start with the ranch. On September 15th, the moving truck showed up at the manor, and a crew of pretty silent men pretty silently took away all the things that I called my own. Now, I'm not gonna lie, I wasn't upset about not having to go up and down all the stairs from the house to the street over and over again, because moving in was a miserable process. And these guys busted their asses doing it. I was very sick to my stomach that day. A lot of it was probably just from the stress of moving, but also for what I attribute to how the house was making me feel. And I'm sorry to tease it again, and you're gonna have to wait till October 30th to find that out, but there's more on that. When the movers were gone, Jonathan came to help me pack up his car and mine, with the cats, my suitcase, and a few other items so that we could make the drive to the Airbnb. I was going to be staying in this pretty posh apartment complex community building structure southwest of the city in a pretty nice area called Eden Prairie. This was very far south from where I was going to be living, but I was choosing to view it as an adventure. It was sort of a little break from reality for 2 weeks. It came with the good news that I was actually going to be staying in a place that was very close to someone I had met a few years earlier through social media, but we'd never actually met in person. His name is Josh. I refer to him as green-haired Josh because I know a lot of Joshes, but green hair is a great identifier for him. And we were able to hang out several times and actually build a rapport that turned into a real friendship, what I consider a real friendship. And Josh, I know you're watching this, and hello. Living down in Eden Prairie for those 2 weeks also continued my string of bad luck. Midway through my stay at the Airbnb, I went to work one Saturday at Pottery Barn. Midway through the day, I could just feel something wrong in my throat. Later in the afternoon, I had a coworker look because in my throat, there was clearly something that was like pushing into my throat and starting to obstruct my airway. So she told me, hey, you need to go to urgent care for this. So I left work and I went to urgent care. They take a quick look. They say, we can't help you. You have to go to the ER. That looks like tonsillitis. So then I go to the ER. It was muggy in the hospital. I had to wear a mask the whole time, apart from taking this quick selfie. But I was in there for forever, and they had to do an MRI to make sure there was nothing else going on. But yes, it was tonsillitis. Specifically, it was a paratonsillar abscess that needed to be lanced open or cut open. And I won't gross you out with all the details here, but when they lanced it open, the stench was so overwhelming that it almost caused me to throw up. Anyway, a few days later, the night before I was finally going to be closing on the ranch, I went to bed with the cats at a very reasonable hour and was awoken at 1 a.m. by the screeching of fire alarms. Not knowing what to do, because this place literally had like 300 apartment units in it, I poked my head out into the hallway and saw that everybody was marching toward the lobby, which was so far away. But masks on, because the building mandated masks, so I put my mask on and I followed suit. I think we had to stand around outside for half an hour, the whole time with me thinking that if there was a fire, I was going to lose my 2 10-year-old cats in it. But of course, there was no fire. Nothing had happened. It was a false alarm. So we were back in. I was back in bed. And a few hours later, I was out of bed so that I could go and sign all of the fucking paperwork to finally make this house mine. Jonathan came and we repeated the process from 2 weeks earlier, loading up our cars and the cats, and we drove to Edina where the title company was. Jonathan stayed in the car with the cats while I was inside, doing the things that needed to be done, and then we were going to make the trek up to Brooklyn Park, where Chad and the movers would meet us. I was excited. Admittedly, I was excited because I was going to get to go to my brand new house. I was going to get to walk through it with my video walkthrough, take all of the before pictures, and then be able to really sit back and relax without having to lift a finger while everything was moved in. But, again, no. We arrived and the movers were already bringing stuff in. Chad was there, and I know that it was just him being helpful and trying to speed along the process for me so that I had as little stress or time wasted as possible. But it was just, it was another example of how with this house, nothing was in my hands or in my control. Nothing would ever be in my hands while living at the ranch. So he and Jonathan and I stood in the kitchen and ate Subway, and I directed the movers on where things were to go, and I was just numb to the experience and to the fact that it was just not what I wanted. What I wanted, exactly as had happened with the manor, was my time in the house. I wanted my woo-woo moment to introduce myself to the house, to be alone in the emptiness and the silence, and to walk through and just look at things. I'd never been alone in the house. There was when I viewed it, and then when I had to go and meet with the inspector, there was always someone there. So I wanted my time with the house, because that means something to me, and you can laugh about that. You know, I know not everybody is the way that I am, and I know that I'm not the way some people are, because some people take it really far. But this is what I wanted, and that was not going to be the case. The only time that would ever happen where I would be alone with nothing in the house would be when I moved out in March of 2023. Instead, when the movers were gone and Chad, finally feeling like he was off the hook, had gone, and then Jonathan and I made a quick trip to Lowe's, and then he too was gone, I could finally take my first selfie in the house, which is now customary for me. I shoved all of the furniture and poster frames and artwork to the far side of the room, making it look like the house was empty, and I took this picture. Sadly, unlike the manor, you don't get many before shots apart from the listing photos, and you don't get a walkthrough video that would be mirrored by one when I moved out, which would have given me the closure I needed. What you get, my dear viewer, is the smoke and mirrors that I got very good at while living in the ranch. The house wasn't what it seemed, my life wasn't what it seemed, and over the next 10 videos, I'll explain why. There were a lot of firsts in the ranch, from hiring out actual plumbing work, to hiring out electrical work, to hiring out, or I guess to filing an insurance claim to handle the water and sewage damage. I had my first appliances replaced in this house. I had my first major health scare as an adult in this house. And ultimately, the biggest adult life changes occurred for me in this house. But we're gonna get there. For now, this was the journey to finding my second house, the ranch. Thank you so much for watching today as we kicked off season 2 of Restoring Sean. If you have questions or comments on anything you saw in the video, please drop them below and I am happy to reply to them. While you're at it, click the like button to help me out, and if you haven't already, click the subscribe button to help yourself out. This way, you'll be reminded every Wednesday morning when a new episode drops. Tune in next week when we go through the history and a game plan behind the ranch in episode 17 of Restoring Sean. And until then, take care, and I will see you soon.